Thanks for joining me on episode 388 of the Inspired Stewardship Podcast.
I'm Mario Pareca from 10 Minute Mindset, the podcast. I challenge you to invest in yourself, invest in others, develop your influence, and impact the world by using your time, your talent, and your treasures to live out your calling. Having the right inspiration to set your mindset on the right path is key. And one way to be inspired to do that is to listen to this, the Inspired Stewardship Podcast with my good friend, Scott Mader.
You know, when you have things that go wrong, when you have things where someone has actually harmed you, or you have things where you've done something and you've screwed up, and you need to learn to forgive yourself and you need to let go of those things so that you can begin to move on more effectively and more efficiently, there are things that you can do to begin to learn to forgive.
Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. If you truly desire to become the person who God wants you to be, then you must learn to use your time, your talent, and your treasures for your true calling. In the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, you will learn to invest in yourself, invest in others, and develop your influence so that you can impact the world.
In today's episode about developing your influence by stewarding your time, I talk with you about how learning to forgive can actually give you more time, why anger and grudges steal your time away, and what you can do to learn to forgive others.
As we talk about stewarding your time, wouldn't it be great if you could support this podcast and do it without just taking too long? Turns out you can't. All you have to do is use inspiredstewardship.com/Amazon when you're ready to make a purchase via Amazon, and a small commission will come back to support the show just that quick. If you enjoy the show when you are ready to buy from Amazon, just use inspiredstewardship.com/Amazon.
One thing that can hold us back sometimes from really using our time as efficiently as possible is not being able to move past things, not being able to forgive ourselves and not being able to forgive others when things go wrong. We get trapped in this cycle sometimes of just dwelling on all of the stuff that went wrong, dwelling on the problems instead of moving on and getting things done. Believe it or not, learning to forgive well is actually a time management tool. It's something that allows you to move past worry and into actually getting things done whenever something has gone wrong. And let me explain this. Something will always go wrong. Someone else will do something to you, or you will do something, and then you will be angry and upset with yourself and frustrated, and you need to learn to have a sense of forgiveness. This is also a way of developing influence, because the truth is that one of the things sometimes that keeps us from reaching others is the fact that we can't forgive them for their own problems. We can't forgive them for something that's gone wrong. We can't forgive someone because we see and we read into everything that happened, intent that's behind it that's causing harm. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that everyone is always out for good, but oftentimes people are, and yet we get angry and frustrated and fail to forgive when something went wrong. As well, when we think about it, we have these anger issues and grudges and frustration that we want to take out on people, that we want to deal with and hold on to. That takes a lot of mental energy, that takes a lot of bandwidth, that takes a lot of cognitive processing power that could be used for creating something, for doing something good, and putting that out into the world instead. In doing that and putting it out there, that allows us to then impact people positively and actually develop our own influence. You know, the truth is that when we hold on to things, they weigh us down. But when we learn to let them go, then they begin to actually get out there into the world. And if we can learn to let go anger and frustration, then that anger and frustration moves out of the way so that we can create and make a positive impact. When you have things that go wrong, when you have things where someone has actually harmed you, or you have things where you've done something and you've screwed up, and you need to learn to forgive yourself, and you need to let go of those things so that you can begin to move on more effectively and more efficiently, there are things that you can do to begin to learn to forgive. And first off, you have to realize something. See, forgiveness, a lot of times we think of forgiveness as being able to do something in a way that just makes everything magically all better. And that's not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness doesn't mean that you've pardoned or excused what the other person has done or what you've done to yourself. Forgiveness doesn't even mean that you need to say it out loud necessarily. And it doesn't mean that you aren't still angry or frustrated or hurt or feeling other emotions about it. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's not further work that needs to be done to make things improve. It doesn't mean that you should forget it. And it doesn't mean that you even have to continue to include the other person if it's another person that's done harm. If the harm is bad enough and it's repeated and it's occurred over and over again, oftentimes forgiveness allows you to cut that person out of your life and move past it. So how do you actually begin to forgive yourself or someone else when things have gone wrong? The first step, you need to think about what it is that caused the problem. What was the incident that triggered the emotion, the anger, the frustration, the hurt? You need to begin to allow your mind to process that emotion and accept that the event happened, accept how you feel about it, acknowledge the fact that it's okay and normal to have that feeling, acknowledge the reality of it, and that you were affected by it. Also, look at the situation and think about what was the growth that came out of it? What was the learning? What about this experience did you learn either about the other person or about yourself? Did it make you to grow in a certain way? Did it identify a place in your life where you need to put in better boundaries and that you need to have a sense of self and control around it? If it was something you did to yourself, is there something you need to develop better routines and better habits and better systems and processes? Now also think again about the other person. If there was another person involved, or if it was yourself, think about yourself. Recognize that everyone, including you, is flawed. Recognize that they were probably operating from their own set of beliefs and history, and you are operating from your history and your beliefs. And we all recognize that sometimes our frame of reference, our habits, our systems, our processes, our beliefs, our history are wrong. Oftentimes when someone else hurts us, it's out of a sense of themselves needing some need. So what was it that you did or that the other person did that caused this conflict and this frustration? Or what is it that you did to yourself? And then finally decide whether or not you need to communicate the idea of forgiveness. And if you need to communicate it to yourself, write it down and read it and say it out loud. If you need to express it to the other person, tell them directly and do it in your own words. Sometimes, though, you just need to forgive them and not even tell them about it, but move on past it. So the goal is that in doing this, you can cut things out of your life that are causing negativity, that are causing a drain on your energy, and that you can then begin to free up your time and your mental imagery to create and develop your influence and impact others in a positive way. Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much for listening to the Inspired Stewardship podcast. As a subscriber and listener, we challenge you to not just sit back and passively listen, but act on what you've heard and find a way to live your calling. If you like this episode on the stewardship of time, be sure to sign up for our Stewardship of Time Tips series by going to inspiredstewardship.com/time or texting 44222 time tips, and that'll get you our best tips on stewarding your time. Until next time, invest your time, your talent, and your treasures. Develop your influence and impact the world.